going to be quite good having Louise. He's great, isn't he? There ain't that much of him, but he's a fine filmmaker. And Ken has been I hate saying this in front of him, but he has been a bit of a hero of mine for a long time. And I worked out that the first time I interviewed you for The Guardian was, guess how long ago?
Probably about 23 years.
Jesus Christ, he's got a memory as well. Yeah, it was. I think it was for Riff Raff. I watched the documentary over the weekend, and I thought it was great, and I thought it was human and moving, and I was astonished that you allowed yourself to have a film made about you. So, Louise, we might need you to answer this. But how on earth... I don't know who knows Ken, but Ken is kind of quite famously private, and he's the kind of person who never used to go to his own parties and things like that. Yeah? So you tell us, how did Louise con you into making a film about yourself?
I'm not certain, really. It is a strange experience. I have to watch it through my fingers, and it was Rebecca O'Brien's idea, and I blame her entirely, and Louise doesn't escape blame either. But it is a bit like having your portrait painted by a very fine painter, and I think it's an enormous, as far as I can tell, enormously generous film. We talked about this. I mean, there are a couple of things that I kind of wish were there. One is that the group I work with get me through every day and do the work, and they're a great bunch of friends and comrades, and we make the films together. And so I do feel I have to say that on the 2 or 3 times spoken after seeing the film, that it have to say that they are hugely important to me and to the films we've done. Also, that you can't work for 50 years doing these kind of films, being away from home a lot without a very strong family, and that I've had. So those 2 things are hugely important. The third point that's missing is that Bath City is about to become a community-owned football club, and there's no mention of that at all, and this is a serious omission.
Maybe Louise is going to do a whole film about that.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think it's on the cards, yeah.
Is there anything that you wish hadn't been in the film? Is there any bit of the film that you go, oh, Jesus, no?
Well, yes. I think Tony Garnett's comment about being doted on is one my mother would dispute heartily, and so it was the being brought up in the 40s was a rather more rigorous time than I think it is now in some respects.
Does it? I know this is something that you'd probably be reluctant to do, but I'm going to force you. Does it make you assess your career and your life, and are you in any way surprised by what's come out of it? And I don't want any self-effacing bollocks here, please, Ken.
I've tried never to do that, really, because I think the moment you start looking back and enjoying it too much, it's just impedes you from doing what's next. I mean, I think you've got to... What propels you into the next job is dissatisfaction with the work you've just done. So I think a level of dissatisfaction with work is very important. Knowing that you've actually failed. You've failed on most of the films you've tried to make. and just having a keen awareness of that is really important, and then saying, I've got to do better. That was the mistake there. That was the mistake in that scene. That was a misjudged shot. That was a shot that was missing. That's an element in the structure. There's an element of the substance of the film that we never questioned. So I think you've just got to keep digging up what you've done, like the last one usually, and saying, now we didn't actually do that element of it, and there's something missing. And so it's that kind of urge that I think propels you on to the next film.
And looking back, watching the documentary, can you give us examples of looking at past films and thinking, I wish I'd done that differently?
Well, Kathy Come Home was a prime example. I mean, it's a very schematic film. Jeremy Sanford did the research, and then the events of the film just echo the research. The characters are very thin. There's no real characterization. They're brought to life by brilliant people, by Carol White and Ray Brooks. But in the writing and in the imagination of the project, they're very tokenistic. So I think that's searching out the contradictions, searching out the big questions, searching out a narrative that will contain the contradictions and will hint at the big issues underneath. Being true to the characters. I mean, this is always the challenge, you know.
I'm sorry to disagree, but I quite like Kathy Come Home. No, controversial. By the way, has anyone said congratulations on the Palme d'Or? Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much. Yes, it was a bit of a surprise, really, but it was a good one.
Ken's always got a line about his films where he, kind of, whenever he wins a Palme d'Or, which he's done twice now, he goes, it was only a little film. Yeah, but, however, and we'll come to this, if I don't come to it, make sure we do, in the film when they talk about your ruthlessness, they are right, aren't they?
Well, I can't really answer that.
You will be doing.
I think to say about the little boy gets caned, I mean, people of a certain age know that everybody got caned then. So this wasn't, I mean, to do it now, it would be child abuse, but at the time, you were doing what there was happening every day. On that day, every day at school, there was a line of boys outside the head study, and they all got caned. They weren't beaten, they were caned. And we arranged, we had planned that they had an extra 10 bob to take to the piggy bank. So every stroke was an extra 10 bob. So they were literally crying all the way to the bank.
Is that genuine?
Yes.
And they've been told that beforehand?
No.
Because they didn't know beforehand. No. See, he's rewriting history here. Kind of Ken Loach gets to write history. So they didn't know, yeah?
They didn't know in advance, but they were quite happy with the extra 10 bob.
Yeah. And is it true that they got 10 bob a go?
That I can't recall. It was nearly 50 years ago.
What about the poor sod who's crying his eyes out at the end in the corner? He should have got at least a quid extra.
Well, he was well compensated. I mean, it was... It wasn't like it looks in the film. I mean, this is the point of filmmaking, isn't it? There was a scene, in a way a worse scene, in Ladybird, which I think is when we first met, in Acton.
The film before that.
Yeah, right. And the kids have to watch their father beating their mother, in this case, literally beating their mother. And... obviously, the effect is traumatic on them, and it was a question of how we did it. And we played the scene without them there, and then they came in, and the two actors did a much less violent part of a repetition of the scene. And that was still shocking enough for it to register on their faces. But of course, when you put it together, it looks as though they're watching the actual beating. And we got a lot of questions about how can you inflict this on children, but of course we didn't. And I think There is a certain things you can do in editing to make it appear that you're exploiting something when in fact you're not.
With the kids in Kes, after that, what did you say to them after that scene?
Well, I think the kids, my impression is that getting caned wasn't a hugely strange thing for them. So, you know, I just said, well, I'm sorry, he felt he had to cane you. And the little lad was, he said, well, I didn't do anything. I said, I know, it's outrageous.
Welcome to the world of movies.
Yeah.
Has making films changed since the 60s for you? Is it easier or is it... Sorry, I'm not speaking to my mic, am I? Not very good, am I? Has changing films made? Has making film... I've just interviewed Ronnie O'Sullivan as well, so I'm going to say to Ken, can you tell me about your 146 break in a minute? Is it different making films today? Is it easier or is it harder?
Well, I think we've been very lucky because, by we I mean our little group, have been very lucky because we've been doing it a long time and we've got a niche really within the film industry, largely due to the producer's ability to find money from European sources, and this is Rebecca who's very skillful at this, and finding enough money that we can do it, but not that much that we're seen as a huge investment, in which case everybody has to take an interest and micromanage us. So we're allowed to work on our own without interference, and I think that's hugely important. So in effect, it hasn't changed in that respect, in that we had freedom in the 60s, and we've pretty well got freedom now, and no one sees the final cut till it's done. So that's a huge privilege. But I know that's not the general rule. It's certainly not the rule in films, and it's certainly not the rule in most television productions, and people here will know a lot about that, and we might talk about that later. But it changes in other ways, in that, of course, you know, at the beginning you can run about more, but you make more mistakes. Later on, you don't have to run around quite so much, but you can try not to make quite so many beginner's mistakes. You still make quite a lot, but not quite as many. So that's the only way. But the essential elements don't change at all. You know, what's the story? Is it worth telling? Who are the characters? Are they true? Where's the light? Can we get the last shot in before the light goes? Those kind of things.
Have you got a favourite film of yours?
No, there's a terribly corny answer to this, but it's. I mean, your films are comparable to children, and you can't have a favourite. And what you remember is the relationships and the friendships and the families that develop in each film. So you remember the process, and you remember the commitment people make, and you remember the going through it together, and that's what you remember. So you couldn't allow yourself to have a favourite, even if you did.
Do you think, you know, kind of, if you look at the kind of issues that you were showing, illustrating in the early films to what you're looking at now, are the issues the same or have they changed?
It's a good question. I think they've developed, but it's. I mean, the details have developed, but it still is. I mean, to put it in old-fashioned language, Simon, it's still the class struggle. It's still the struggle between those who own and exploit and those who are exploited, and that's constant. And it's not come from our imagination. It comes from the basic conflict within society. And if you're interested in the mechanics of society, and as Paul said in the film, where power lies and how that power is expressed, and how we are persuaded to accept it, then in a way what you are confronted, you don't have to go looking for it, what you're confronted with every day is the expression of that dominance by one class over another. I mean, we're witnessing the European referendum. You couldn't have a clearer example of how the ruling class has taken that issue and made it an argument between two elements of those who wish to exploit. Can you exploit workers better by being in the European Union, which is there to privatize, it's there to humiliate any country that steps outside? Look what they did to Greece, how they forced mass unemployment, forced them to take a loan that they cannot ever pay back, forcing them to sell off every national asset they have. So can you exploit people better in the European Union, or can you exploit them better under Boris Johnson and Michael Gove, who will then destroy every vestige of protection that workers have, that will remove the working regulations such as they are, that will give no environmental protections, that will be back to the hardcore, we're already in the hardcore Thatcherite period of policies, but will exacerbate it even further. Which is the better to exploit people in? And that's the debate we're being forced to have. I mean, you couldn't have a clear example of where the power lies.
Have your views on Europe changed, Ken?
Not really. I think this is a tactical issue, I think. Because, again, how can we resist that exploitation better? My own view, I don't know what you feel. My view is that we're better off in and making alliances with Podemos, the left of Syriza, other left groups within Europe. But it's a tactical issue, I think, for the left. But there's no chance of having that discussion.
When you and Tony were like 26, 27, did you think society would be different from how it is today? Did you believe that we would have had some kind of socialist revolution? Or were you like, nah, it's never going to happen?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, when I was 26, I was campaigning for Harold Wilson in Hammersmith and pushing leaflets through doors and listening to him speak at the white heat of the technical revolution. And then, within 2 years, we'd seen through him. And a lot of people moved to the left in the 60s, to the anti-Stalinist left. And that, in a way, is where we learned our politics. So I suppose from the age of late 20s, we were in revolutionary groups or associated with left groups where there was a great deal of revolutionary optimism. And the revolution was always around the corner. And there was always a feeling, this time, 1968, of course, factory occupations, people on the streets. I mean, it was a very heady time. But then reality kicks in, and you see that capitalism is very clever at reorganizing itself and giving itself a new face. And so, of course, the revolution is endlessly delayed. But nevertheless, he says optimistically, nevertheless, they have an end game now because the economy, the environment is collapsing, and we know it's collapsing. So, like maybe in the 60s, certainly in the 19th century, people advancing these ideas could look forward to centuries of struggle. Now, we know that we can't. Certainly our grandchildren will pay the price for our failure to change the means of production, the ownership of production, and so on.
That's like a really weird form of optimism, Ken. We've got to be optimistic because the world's ending soon.
Well, things have to change. I mean, history can't be static. That's all. It can't be static, can it?
And politically, in Britain and with Labour, where are you standing on the optimism-pessimism swingometer there?
On
the jazzerometer, where are you swinging today?
On the jazzerometer. I think it was great good news when Jeremy Corbyn got elected with John McDonnell. I think everybody knew that there was going to be a huge battle, because obviously the Parliamentary Labour Party is deeply hostile, almost to a man and a woman. But the party, insofar as I can judge it, is very positive. So it's a struggle to keep that victory in place. Who knows how it'll turn out? I don't know. I think the battle now is in the trade unions and the constituency Labour parties.
So you back in Labour now? What's happened with Left Unity?
Well, a lot of people have with a lot of people's approval, have decided to go back to Labour, because, as I say, I think that's where the big battle is. Some of us have stayed with Left Unity, from my point of view, because a lot of people put a lot into that, and it could well be that it'll need to be very active again if the right wing, the Blairites manage to get rid of Corbyn. So I think we want to keep the organisation, but certainly support Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell's project.
Now, segueing to something completely nothing to do with that, have you ever been starstruck by anyone you've cast?
Well,
mentioning no names.
Well, of course, yes.
Was it Ricky Tomlinson? It was Ricky Tomlinson's arse, wasn't it?
It was Ricky Tomlinson's arse. Well, second to Ricky Tomlinson's arse, it was Eric Cantona, who, of course, great footballer, and who came into our office and said he would like to make a film. So that was a serious moment, and we both gazed at each other and were momentally tongue-tied. But he was good. He was a good team player.
He wasn't momentary tongue-tied. He was tongue-tied for like months. Don't believe a word of it. I saw you around then. Yeah. But it's interesting that you're willing to cast Cantona, but I have met so many like brilliant, famous actors and actresses who would love to be in your films, and you would never have them. You wouldn't dream of having them. Can you tell us why you wouldn't? Seriously, kind of mega Hollywood stars. I interview them, they say, I'd love to be in a Ken Loach film, and he's like, nah, never. Why?
Well, I think there's, I guess the real answer is that your first responsibility is to the film. Your first responsibility is to put on screen that story with those people that the audience will believe in, that the audience will weep for, will cry, will laugh with, will have solidarity with, maybe, will believe in. And if you cast somebody who's a well-known face, then clearly it's a performance. It is not that person. And the deal with the audience is, I think, what we want to say is, look, just suspend your disbelief, and we'll do everything we can to enable you to do that. And that means having somebody on screen that you can just believe without any reservation and without seeing the distance they travel between their public persona and the character you're looking at. So that's why it's good to find someone who is credible.
Why have you worked with comedians so often?
Comedians, well, first of all, a lot of comedy is working class comedy. Comedy comes out of poverty, comes out of hardship, comes out of struggle. And people who do stand-up have what is basic to their engaging with an audience, again, is credibility, is believing in the stories they tell. Billy Connolly, for example, John Bishop, another example, lots of examples. I mean, the Kevin, great young Scottish guy, Bridges, yes. I mean, almost all of the comics you can think of, they have this ability just to draw you into their stories, and you believe them. And that quality is really what you're looking for when you audition. Also, their timing is always brilliant. They have an easy eloquence, so they can reframe a sentence or carry on a scene in their own words, because that's what they do. So it's a very fertile ground. Also, dinner ladies are very good too.
Love a good dinner lady.
Police are very good. Police are very good. People in shops are good. There's lots of work that people do that are great training for being in films.
Do you ever feel, in any of your films, you look back and think, I got that wrong because the politics came ahead of the story?
There are some examples of that, yes. I'd have to think hard. I think one thing then, Paul Lavsey and I have talked about this in Carla's Song, which is a story, the first one he and I did together, is a story set in Nicaragua, and the Sandinista period, and it's the time of the Civil War. Oh, well, not Civil War, it's the Americans paying for and training terrorists, contra-terrorists, to go to Nicaragua to destabilize and remove the Sandinista government. And we didn't get the story right, so that what the Americans were really doing was clear. And so we had to have a scene where we explained it. And we both said this was a structural problem. I think it's happened we did a series called Days of Hope, and it's 4 films set in the early 70s. We made it 4 films from the First World War to the General Strike, 1916 to 26, and activists in the labour movement, and their development and their personal development and their political development. The personal development is at the expense of the political development, and particularly that was true in the last film about the General Strike. And there was one funny moment. Can I tell this story? One funny moment when Jim Allen, who wrote it, brilliant writer, great writer, and we were talking about this, and I said, Jim, look, we've got to. There's 2 people in this. They're supposed to be a married couple. You know, they've got to have a married life apart from just talking politics. And Jim scratched his head. He said, well, okay, Nell, he said, I don't know what to do about that. So anyway, he said, I'll come up with something. Anyway, weeks went past, and eventually a scrappy piece of paper came up. And it was the 2 people involved. One was a Labour MP who'd been an active trade unionist and was now on the right and was opposed to the strike. And the other was his wife, who was just an activist working in the support committee for the strike. So they were on different sides. And Philip, the bloke, came home one evening. This was the scene Jim wrote. Philip walks in the bedroom. His wife's already in bed. And Philip starts to get undressed, gets into bed. Philip, is this your leg? Sarah, get off. Philip, did you see what happened to the Archbishop of Canterbury? And that was it. That was as far as we got. That was as far as we got with the personal relationship. So yes, the answer to the question is yes, and that was the case in point.
That was yours and Jim's first step into erotica.
Yes, it was. It didn't get many stars.
One of the things I've been around Ken's sets kind of quite a bit over the years, and one of the things that has struck me, which I think is quite unusual, is that the people tend to be nice. It's quite weird. I wanted to ask, how important is it that the people you work with you do like, and have there been people you haven't liked? For example, people who have acted in the films. If so, would you care to name them?
I can honestly say that I can't think of one actor that I haven't liked. I think actors are the bravest people. And I could go on at length, but I won't. The atmosphere in the set, I mean, I think is absolutely critical. And there is one example where it didn't work, and I'll come to that. But the reason it isn't just about making the day pass in a friendly way is that you're asking people to be in the film, to make themselves vulnerable, to make themselves open, to risk showing something about themselves that is really very private. Now, you can only do that if there's a supportive, creative atmosphere. If there's any suggestion that there's a kind of unease, there's somebody's disgruntled, there's any kind of mood of tension or conflict, people close up. And they close up into a kind of professional, hard exterior. And that destroys the process. So it isn't just something that makes the day go better. It's absolutely a requirement of the process. And we've been hugely, this is why I mentioned it right at the beginning, we've been hugely lucky and built up over the years a great team of people. But most film people are terrific. Most people working in films come into it in order to be constructive and helpful and supportive. Of course. So you only need the context. But there was one example in when we were doing Land of Freedom in Spain, and we had a Spanish first assistant who had been used to working on big American films, and I didn't speak much Spanish, so I would say to him, could you ask the person in the person in the back row to just look around and move slightly over to the down to that point there, whenever they think it's a suitable moment, whenever they feel the moment's right, and he would then interpret that into Spanish by shouting at the person and instructing them in the fiercest way he could when to move. And of course, it completely destroyed the sense of collective decisions, which is central to what you have to achieve. So he moved on, and we got a friendlier face.
Have you ever had a Tory working with you? And have you had any Tory friends?
We had a Tory. We did a film called Family Life years and years ago about a girl, and the description was very precise. The girl suffers from the diagnosis of schizophrenia. It was based on Ronnie Lang's books called Sanity, Madness and the Family, which has received some critical attention these days, but was very much the thing back in the 60s. And we did the film right in the early 70s. And the mother is anybody who knows the book will know that the mother is a very significant figure in these families. And it's to do with the denying the individuality of a growing child. And we wanted someone to be this person, but not to pass judgment on the character as she was playing it. And of course, that's what tends to happen, when inevitably actors will see the direction of the script and will see the... it's very difficult in the performance for the actor not to disassociate themselves from that role, and you can see it in the performance. So we thought, where am I going to find someone? So we were filming in North London. So we went to the 2 or 3 North London Conservative associations because we wanted someone to embody the what are called traditional family values, and we auditioned several. And they were phenomenal, I have to say. They were, this is pre-Thatcher. I mean, they were serious women. We auditioned. We were spoiled for choice. They were queuing up really to play this role. And so anyway, we selected one. Grace Cave, her name was, and she was a very nice woman, she saw the film scene by scene and had no problem with identifying what the mother did, which when you put it all together was quite brutal and very subtle. Like telling the child, the daughter, well, you're just like me, you do this, this and this, and I know what you're thinking, and I know what you're going to do, and so on, in a way devaluing her individuality and self-belief as an individual. Anyway, Grace did all this. And then there was a moment of fear when she sat down and saw the film, and it was clear, the direction of the film and her role in it. And I said, "What did you think, Grace?" And she said, "You gave me a fair crack of the whip." And that was her comment.
Do you stay in touch with Grace?
I did for quite a time, yes. I mean, it was a long time ago.
How tough were the 80s? I think the time that we got to know each other was just when you'd started making films again. And in a way, you've had two careers, because the 60s and 70s, and then for what, 12 years, you didn't make a film. How hard was that? Did you think of quitting? Did you think there was some kind of vendetta against you?
No, I did, just for the record, I did do one film in the 80s, and I made a real pig's ear of it. I mean, it was a good script written by Trevor Griffiths called Fatherland, and I did it badly. And I think, I mean, it had been 4 or 5 years before I made it, and it was 5 or 6 years after before I made the next one. And you do lose confidence. You lose, well, I did, and you lose, I just forgot what words to say, and how to go about it, and how to create a scene, and I just lost confidence. So I did a bad job of that. The documentaries were being silenced, and I guess you try, and also, I mean, if you think you're political, you try to put that into a context. You know where people are coming from. I mean, I knew why they silenced the discussion about trade union leadership, because the Thatcher project was not decided at that point. They were still in the process of winning, as they thought. So they didn't want anything that would provide succor or support to militant trade unionists. So they censored it. It was the same with the miners' strike. And Melvin is at pains to point out that it did go out on Channel 4 just before the strike ended, and he played a part in getting it out. But nevertheless, they killed it from the South Bank show. And and it only went out when the strike was all but lost. So it could have no impact. And in any case, it was a tiny drop in the ocean when you were hearing every night, every day, every newspaper, picket line violence. I mean, everyone here, people here will remember it, I'm sure. The story you heard was picket line violence. But if you went, and I'm sure there's some people in the audience who did go in South Yorkshire, you saw the police vans holding up their £5 and their £10 notes as they went in to the pits, taunting the miners with the overtime they were getting, you know, and then at the standoff when they were holding them back, you know, running their boots down the miners' legs to rip the skin off their shins. You know, if you saw that, and then every night you heard the reverse being told, and in every newspaper, I mean, one tiny drop in the ocean, what was they going to do? And yet Melvin admits in the film, he admits the censorship. And of course, if they were censoring then, they will continue to do it, and they are continuing to do it. But the difference now, and I think this relates to what you were saying earlier, Simon, the difference now is that the programs don't get made because the checks and balances are there right at the outset. What was different for us is that nobody watched what we were doing until the programs were finished. And then the lad Paul Madden at Channel 4, who was the guy who was in charge of commissioning the programs, he got the sack. He got the sack for it. You know, and I mean that was one of the many horrors of that.
For which
time.
film?
For Questions of Leadership, for allowing it to be made and not.
What happened to him?
I don't know. I mean, he was a nice guy. I mean, we stayed in touch for a time, and he went and did something else. But I mean, Channel 4, you know, to trade on its reputation, or try to make its reputation of being the place that you could say alternative things, not true.
What's it like now when you see Melvin Bragg or Max Stafford Clark? I mean, one thing that was apparent in that film is that there's still a tension, and I don't think you have forgiven them, have you, for what they did?
Melvin is an old pal, and we got over it, and we see each other from time to time, and Melvin's fine, and I'm fine, and I think we both recognise something happened that shouldn't have happened, and he's moved on, and, you know, I knew him a long time before it happened, and we're fine, and I enjoy his books, and we're in touch. Max Stafford Clark, I think, was the most serious betrayal of all, and I haven't seen Max Stafford Clark since. But I think that of all things, that was deeply shocking because of the personal abuse at the time was. We were just exposed to cries of racism and the rest. Well, you'll know all about, and it was deeply shocking and disturbing, and to have no one defend you. We said at the time, can we at least do one performance for the actors' agents and their families, and a critic or two, just to show that this is a good piece of work? And he said, no, get out the theatre. That was deeply shocking.
Ken, I think we should have we got time to open it up to the floor a bit? 3 questions. All right, 3 questions, please. I want to ask you first, what kind of is more embarrassing, having voted Tory at school or made the McDonald's advert?
Oh, the McDonald's advert, by far.
Sorry, I'm really sorry. We've been...
Oh, God.
Can I ask the woman on the second row, please? Hi.
Oh, there's a mic. Sorry. Hi. Thank you for everything. I'm a fan of so many years. So I have a lot of questions, but the one is going back to the 80s and the lost decade. Did you ever consider to perhaps do something, go somewhere else, perhaps go to Europe and do something there or something like that?
I don't know, it didn't seem an option. I think I'd lost confidence in being able to work. I think to do that, you'd have to feel confident in your own ability, and I kind of lost it, really. And was rescued when David Putnam phoned up and said, would you like to do a film about John Stalker and the Northern Ireland shoot-to-kill policy? And talking of censorship, there's another whole story.
That's another night. 2 more quick questions. The man with the very sparkly white T-shirt.
Thank you. Kenneth, just going back to Kes again, and it's interesting to know even 20 years ago they were using the playground fight on the Cole Leap sketch for teaching teachers how to break up fights. And I think the reason it was, because it's so close to the human condition and a big respect for how you keep to that at all times. Do you think that sort of frightens the entertainment establishment, or did it then, or does it not now?
I think it's just a kind of filmmaking which is just outside the way people talk about films in this country. We are so dominated by the States, by American cinema, and if they're British films, most of them tend to look across the Atlantic. So, whereas the kind of films that we've always tried to make, the writers and producers and actors and everybody, cameramen, sound recorders, editors, everybody that we've tried to make actually look across to Europe, and it's just a different aesthetic. It's a different approach, and so it kind of sits uneasily. They don't quite know how to promote stuff. Well, we've got a really good distributor now. I'm not including them in it, but by and large, people haven't known how to promote it. With Kes, the Americans said they understood Hungarian better, and they opened it in Doncaster, thinking it wouldn't go anywhere else, and that was it. And they don't know quite how to deal with it, really.
Final question. Can we take the man at the front?
I did promise, yes. Now you've come out of retirement, Ken, and I know it was touched on in Spirit of 45. Would you consider making just one more film, a feature film, about the creeping privatisation in the National Health Service?
Well, it's a huge subject, and there are so many films that need to be made about that. Both in investigative documentaries and journalism and so on. I mean, there's a huge. I think the important question is why is privatization seen as a good thing? You know, what's the political justification for it? Examine that really, and to counterpose the collective versus the individual company making profits. You know and counterposing those two ideologies. And yeah, I mean, so many films to make, aren't there? That's the temptation.
Does that mean that you are officially out of retirement?
Well,
Can we have this on the record?
It was a stupid thing to say, and I've been pilloried for it ever since. Really. But I don't know. I don't know. It's easy in nice, supportive.
Oi, are you working on a movie or what?
Not at the moment. No, not at the moment.
Are you reading a script at the moment?
Well, you're always knocking ideas backward and forward.
Is Paul Laverty working on a script at the moment?
No. Look.
When's your next movie coming out?
I know you called Vanessa Redgrave cantankerous, so I'm going to return the compliment.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for coming. Thank you, Louise, for making a fabulous film, brilliantly titled Verses. Thank you, Ken, for being great.